Okay, I've made some progress on the Peugeot 205 rally car here for the off-road group build. Got the steering wheel done, drilled those holes out in the spokes, and then got the seats and fire extinguisher, shifter, and handbrake all installed to the platform. And now we're going to install this onto or into the chassis. The decals are fairly brittle on this kit. It's been quite a challenge. Most of them have broken apart in some way, and I've had to try to piece them back together. I do have replacement decals, but that does not cover most of the interior, so these are all old decals. That's why they are such a pain in the rear. But I've salvaged them for the most part, and they look okay. I've also learned that in airbrushing, I've used Tamiya lacquer paints, and I over-thinned them, where on the seats, they did not want to stick to the edges, so then I had to go back and touch them up. But as far as looks are concerned, they came out pretty good. I'm happy with them. Could be a little better. There's some flaws, but for the most part, you probably won't see them because they'll be inside the car. Now, the tricky part is going to be this part right here. It's going to have to slide kind of inside this slot here. And I don't quite know how I'm going to manage that, but yeah, we're going to try it. In fact, I was going to use this glue. I don't think I'm going to use that. I think I'm going to use a slower setting glue. So we're going to do this stuff. That slipped in there a lot easier than I thought it was going to. Did leave a slight mark on the firewall there, so I'll have to clean that up just a little bit, but really that's not going to be that big a deal. I'm surprised. Holy cow. That was much easier than I thought it was going to be. I really thought that was going to be a nightmare. Sweet. Steering wheel and pedal set are now installed. Next up is the radiator, and to highlight the radiator, I used the AK marker. This is gunmetal. These work well, but they can't be handled a whole lot. Otherwise, you're going to have to touch them up. Per typical, I do like to use the Super Gold with spots that may be seen because this dries clear. More forward progress on the 205. Got the cage installed. That was a bit tricky, especially putting on the decals on the roll bar padding. Mid-80s decals kind of started coming apart again, but managed to salvage most of it. Also installed the dash with the gauge panel and clusters. With the replacement decals from Decalis, it came with new gauge decals, so I installed those. Problem with that is the right side gauge cluster didn't show up on the black dashboard. For whatever reason, it disappeared. It was like it was supposed to be on a white background, so that didn't work. Tried to use the original decal set. That fell apart, so I went ahead and just did my best to brush paint the buttons and panel on the right-hand side. So all that's in there. The last thing we have to do is put on the left side driver door card, detail that, and the interior is done. And now let's get started on that door card. What I'm going to attempt to do is use this marker. This is a flat black marker. It works exceptionally well on doing detail work like around windows and any small little flat black detail work that you need done. I've used it several times on this car. Works fantastic. The thing I like about it is it flows easy and it's got a fairly fine point to it. Actually, I've got to find more. So they want you to paint the whole part flat black, but when I looked at the actual car, it's a net. So we're going to try to see if we can individually paint the actual netting. If not, then we'll just do the whole thing. But we're going to start out trying to do just the netting itself. You do something like this, you try to be as light as you can. You see I got a little heavy in the bottom corner. Just lightly dragging it best as I can. Probably be a little uneven. I'm not super worried about it being perfect because I just want it to give the effect It's going to be down inside. It's going to be hard to see anyways. You know, today is the 25th of December, and I am supposed to have this completed by the end of December 31st. At least that's the technical deadline. We'll see if we can get there. And this is where we're at. Ready to go onto the body and see if we can't get that done for the deadline. Cross my fingers. Hopefully the decals go well. They went well with the gauges except for the one part, but that was a pigment thing or something. So cross our fingers and hopefully we have no issues there. Hey, this is me from the future. I'm editing. I don't know why a mouse signals that I'm editing, but I'm editing the video, and I forgot to mention that I wanted to give a shout out to Pat over at Card Scale Dreams, because originally this build was for his off-road group build 2024. I just wanted to say thank you so much for hosting the group build. This is a little late, obviously, but I really did appreciate it, and I enjoyed participating as much as I could in the group build. All right, back to the video. In the final phase of assembly here, just a few notes to keep in mind for context's sake. This is the fourth kit that I have ever built, and this is the first kit that I have used an airbrush on. So like 99% of this kit, I did use an airbrush. Starting with the body here, I painted this thing. I went a little too heavy. I had to sand it down and reshoot it. Not a big deal. And then I had to use aftermarket decals because the kit decals that I had, I did not trust to work. So I used Decalis brand decals. What I was not aware of is that these decals, you cannot use solution or heat to put these on, to apply these. And this is the first time that I've ever encountered decals that you couldn't use solution and or heat to help the decals out. And in putting and applying these decals, they were just very tricky. Now, I did all the normal stuff. I even looked at the directions, and it just a huge learning curve for me because they didn't want to stick. And even though, just like always, my surfaces are nice and glossy and smooth so that the decals have a very easy time being applied and sticking, they just did not want to stick. Especially on corners, there's not a whole lot of flat, large surfaces, so they just did not want to adhere, and I could use nothing to help them adhere to the surface. These stripes aren't even the actual stripes from Decalis, the aftermarket decal. These are the kit stripes, and they're kind of all wrinkly because they started falling apart. The Decalis brand decals just started coming apart because I had to work them so much with water that they started falling apart because they would just not stay down. They would not adhere to the surface. This one did, but it cracked right here. I had to patch it. You know, back here, these stripes did work, but it took a while, and I finally kind of got the hang of it. But like the stripes back here, they were oversized, and then I would have rather them be undersized than oversized. And them being oversized caused a huge problem because they didn't want to wrap around the edge and stick. And again, I can't use anything to help them stick. I would let them dry, and as they would dry, they would just start to peel back up. They just would not stick to the surface. And I kind of tried to piece things together. It just wasn't working. And then when I shot clear, I didn't realize that the decals, none of the decals that I'd used from Decalis, they didn't seal. So they all started peeling back up because the clear that I was using, which is safe for decals, had worked its way underneath the decal because it didn't seal. It's the first time I've ever had that happen. So I had to stick it in the dehydrator, and I actually had to treat it like vinyl, and I had to work the clear out from underneath the decal, and I even had to poke holes to get the clear out from underneath the decal. It's the most bizarre thing I've ever had to do. It was so weird. And this is the end result. It doesn't look great. You can't really tell from here, but you can tell where it's still trying to lift. It doesn't look very good. I was pretty frustrated. So my dad, luckily for me, had an extra kit. So I went ahead, prepped and repainted the body. And I figured that the decals were a user error because I did manage to get the back end of the car with the stripes to lay down. I figured, well, this time I'll make it a little better. So I ordered another set of decals because these were the only decals that I could find that resembled the factory colors. And in the meantime, I went ahead and prepped my tires and wheels. I did the same thing that I usually do. This time I actually airbrushed rubber black over the tread and then did my matte varnish from Vallejo over the sidewalls. Everything worked. Usually I brush the rubber black over the tread. Did airbrush this time. That worked really well. And then I tried valve stems. This was pretty difficult for this particular wheel just because of the offset in the wheel, but I managed to make it work. And now you're looking at the final result here. Again, there's a lot of firsts here for me. I masked off around the window and around the spoiler and the little emblem in the front. That's the first time I've ever masked off anything. Learned a little bit, left the tape on a little too long and had to wet sand a little bit more around that because it left a little imprint where the tape was. So lesson learned there. Just a lot of lessons learned in this whole process. I went to apply the decals again, and this time it was even worse. The decals just never stuck. I had to use white glue to get them to stick this time, and I did the best that I could. They're oversized. They just do not want to stick. I don't know what the problem is with these decals. I'm sure other people get these decals to work just fine, or maybe on other kits, their brand of decals work. The decals on this particular kit just did not work. I followed the instructions to the T. I've never had issues like this applying decals. So then I had to like piece it together as best I could. I salvaged the stripes as best as I could and then just cleared everything and polished it out and then applied the rest of the decals between the two kits. I piecemealed everything together and just salvaged what I could, and this is the end result. It's not my favorite. It's a little frustrating. I'm not super disappointed. It's just, it could have been better. I'm not looking for perfect, but I wish it had turned out a little bit better with especially the stripes part. Aging decals are just tough to begin with, but I think I have a level of expectation when it comes to aging decals that I'm okay with. What I am frustrated with is the brand new aftermarket decals that just didn't want to stick. That for me was just a little too frustrating. So it's very unfortunate that they didn't want to stick. It does not look as great as I wanted it to, but everything else I was really happy with. One other note on final assembly, two things did not fit together really well. That was the belly pan going underneath the car. For whatever reason, one side was a little thicker and I had to grind that out because it just didn't want to line up. I don't know what the deal was there. And then upon further inspection, putting the body on, I noticed that a lot of the guide pins were not very tight to give you a good guide as to where things lined up. You kind of had to just take your best guess. And I thought I did pretty good at getting things lined up for the next piece. And when I put everything together, nothing felt like it was misaligned or I had to move things around or, crack things back apart and then re-glue things. Everything seemed to fit pretty good. But what I did notice is there was definitely some wiggle room for almost every piece that I put together. And you don't notice it until you try to put the body on, and then you run into problems at the nose of the car where there's a little scoop where it exhausts the air that blows through the radiator back up through the hood. And then there's the glass that separates the engine bay from the cockpit. The roll cage goes over that, and even though I had filed that area down for the roll cage to go through to make sure that there was enough clearance, it still ended up not being enough, and it propped up one side of the body, so I had to sand and file down a little bit of the roll cage, and I just had to do some finagling. Same thing with the back of the car. There's what appears to be some sort of radiator pieces or some sort of cooling pieces in the back. Those you can actually move. And I thought I had test fit those and tried to put the clamshell, the hatch part of the body on and do the best that I could to figure out where those would line up because there was some play in those. I did not get that right either, so I had to do some readjustments so that if and when I do put the hatch on, that closes at least remotely well. I'm going to leave the hatch off anyways because I think I like the way the engine bay looks, and so I'm going to leave it off for when I take it to shows and stuff. But this kit ended up being a little bit more ambiguous than I thought it was going to be. It's an older Tamiya kit. It's just not as precise as I think I was expecting. So it was a fun kit to put together. It didn't quite turn out like I thought it would. Again, fourth kit, learned a whole lot, and I probably will not be purchasing any more Decalis brand decals. That's what my takeaway here is. But I did enjoy learning to use the airbrush and learning a bunch of techniques doing the airbrush. So that was a lot of fun. Got to mix my own and then use all clad and some splash paints and some other stuff. So that was great. I hope you all enjoyed this series.